Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Life often comes with seasons of abundance, clarity, and divine intervention. In these moments, it feels as though heaven itself is smiling upon us, guiding our every step. But then there are seasons when the heavens seem closed, prayers seem unanswered, and silence fills the void. These are the moments that test not just our faith, but our character, our patience, and our understanding of God's purpose. Today, I want to tell you that God's silence is not his absence. God's silence is not his punishment. God's silence is a setup for your greatest growth. When God is silent, he is watching. Think of a teacher during a test. The instructor is always present, but they are silent, because this is your time to apply what you've learned. God's silence is not abandonment, it's trust. He believes in the seed he has placed in you, and he is giving you the opportunity to water it, nurture it, and watch it grow. God's silence is not his absence. This is a truth that anchors us when we navigate seasons of uncertainty. There are moments in life when it feels as though the heavens have gone quiet and our prayers echo back unanswered. In these times, it's easy to assume that God has turned away, forgotten us, or left us to fend for ourselves. But nothing could be further from the truth. God's not a sign of his neglect or disinterest. Rather, it is a profound expression of his commitment to our growth. Consider the example of a teacher in a classroom. During the lesson, the teacher speaks, explains, and guides the students, ensuring they understand the material. But during a test, the teacher is silent, not because they are absent or indifferent, but because it is now the student to demonstrate their understanding and apply what they have learned. In the same way, God's silence is often a signal that we are in a season of testing, a time to step forward in faith and put into practice the lessons he has already planted in our hearts. This silence can be unsettling, especially for those of us who are used to seeing clear signs of God's presence in our lives. We may expect answers to come swiftly, doors to open miraculously, or circumstances to change dramatically. But God's ways are higher than our ways, and his thoughts are higher than our thoughts. He sees the bigger picture, one that stretches far beyond the present moment. His silence is not an indication of disinterest, but of his deep confidence in our ability to walk forward in faith, even without constant affirmation. Furthermore, silence does not equate to inaction. Just because we cannot perceive God working in the way we expect does not mean he is idle. Often, God is working behind the scenes in ways that we cannot see or comprehend. He is orchestrating circumstances, preparing opportunities, and aligning events according to his perfect plan. Our task during the silence is to trust him, even when we cannot trace him, and to remain steadfast in the belief that he is present, active, and deeply involved in our lives. God's silence is also an invitation to draw closer to him. It challenges us to lean not on our understanding, but on his promises. It is in these silent seasons that we learn to rely on his word, which is unchanging and always true. While our emotions may waver and the world may suggest that silence means abandonment, the Bible assures us that God will never level me nor forsake us. His silence then becomes an opportunity to deepen our relationship with him, to seek him with all our hearts, and to discover the profound truth of his unwavering love. This truth is evident in the lives of many biblical figures. Consider Joseph, who endured years of silence while imprisoned and forgotten. Despite the apparent absence of God, Joseph remained faithful, trusting that God's promises would be fulfilled. When the silence ended, Joseph emerged not just as a survivor, but as a leader, positioned to save nations. His story reminds us that silence is not a denial of God's plans, but a necessary season of preparation. In essence, God's silence is never a reflection of his absence, but a powerful reminder of his presence. It is a period where he entrusts us with the responsibility to grow, mature, and rely on him in deeper ways. When we embrace this truth, the silence becomes less of a burden and more of a blessing, a divine opportunity to strengthen our faith and prepare for the greater things he has in store. Growth often takes place in the most unlikely and quiet places, and God's silence is one of the most profound environments where this growth occurs. When everything around us feels still and no divine answer seems forthcoming, it is easy to mistake the silence for stagnation. Yet, the silence of God is a fertile ground for transformation, where the deepest and most meaningful development takes place. Just as seeds grow beneath the soil, hidden from view, our spiritual, emotional, and personal growth is often nurtured in seasons of quiet. When a seed is planted, the initial work happens out of sight. Beneath the surface, the seed breaks open, sending out roots that anchor it firmly into the ground. Without this unseen process, the seed would never have the strength to break through the soil and become the plant or tree it was designed to be. The silence we experience from God functions in much the same way. It is not a sign that nothing is happening. Rather, it is evidence that essential work is taking place beneath the surface. In this quiet process, God is developing resilience, patience, and trust within us. Growth in silence also teaches us the importance of perseverance. When answers and outcomes are immediate, there is little room to develop endurance. However, in the absence of instant gratification, we are forced to cultivate a spirit of persistence, learning to keep moving forward even when results are not yet visible. This perseverance is essential for the greater purposes God has planned for us. Like the roots of a tree that grow deep to sustain it through storms, our perseverance ensures that we are prepared to handle the challenges and responsibilities that come with growth. Furthermore, silence provides the opportunity to refine our character. In the stillness, we are confronted with our thoughts, fears, and doubts, as well as the areas in our lives that require transformation. It is a time for self-examination and for allowing God to mold us in ways that would not be possible amidst noise and activity. This process can be uncomfortable, as it often reveals weaknesses or blind spots we might otherwise ignore. But it is through this discomfort that true growth occurs. Just as a sculptor chisels away at a block of marble to reveal a masterpiece, God uses seasons of silence to shape us into the people He has called us to be. One of the greatest challenges of growth in silence is learning to trust the process. Trusting that even when we cannot see progress, something is happening. Trusting that even when we cannot hear His voice, God is present and at work. This trust is not passive. It requires active faith, a commitment to continue nurturing our relationship with Him, and the willingness to obey His word even when circumstances suggest otherwise. It is this active faith that allows us to align ourselves with His purpose and position ourselves for the fulfillment of His promises. God's silence also shifts our focus from external validation to internal transformation. In times of silence, we learn that our worth is not determined by outward success or immediate results, but by our identity as His children. This internal shift allows us to grow in confidence, not in our own abilities, but in His power and faithfulness. Ultimately, growth during God's silence is preparation for what lies ahead. Every great work of God in the Bible was preceded by a season of quiet development. Before Moses led the Israelites, he spent years in the desert. Before David became king, he tended sheep and fled from Saul. Before Jesus began his ministry, he spent 40 days in the wilderness. In each of these cases, the silence was not a delay of God's plan, but an essential part of it. Thus, God's silence is not a time of emptiness, but a season of hidden growth. It is a reminder that what is unseen is often more important than what is visible. As we embrace the quiet and allow God to work within us, we prepare ourselves to emerge stronger, wiser, and ready to fulfill His purposes. Faith at its core is most profoundly tested and strengthened in the silence of God. When the clear answers, comforting signs, and immediate interventions we long for are absent, we are left with the challenge of trusting in something or someone we cannot see. It is in these moments of silence that faith is forged, moving from a surface level reliance on visible outcomes to a deeper, unshakable conviction rooted in God's character and promises. Anyone can claim faith when the evidence is tangible. It is easy to believe in God's goodness when blessings abound, prayers are answered quickly, and life unfolds according to our plans. But what happens when the blessings seem distant, prayers go unanswered, and the path ahead is shrouded in uncertainty? This is where true faith begins. Faith is not the assurance that everything will happen as we desire, but the confidence that God remains sovereign and faithful even when circumstances appear to contradict His promises. In the silence, faith moves beyond the realm of feelings and into the realm of trust. Emotions are fleeting and often influenced by external conditions, but trust is a choice, a decision to believe in God's goodness, love, and wisdom despite the lack of immediate evidence. The silence of God compels us to make this choice repeatedly, teaching us to rely not on what we feel, but on what we know to be true about Him. This shift from emotion-based faith to trust-based faith is a crucial aspect of spiritual maturity. The silence also forces us to confront our doubts. In the absence of clear answers, questions inevitably arise. Does God hear me? Does He care? Has He forgotten me? While these questions can be unsettling, they serve an important purpose. Doubt, when addressed with honesty and humility, can lead to a stronger, more resilient faith. It pushes us to search the Scriptures, seek wise counsel, and reflect on God's past faithfulness. In doing so, we discover that doubt does not have to destroy faith. Instead, it can refine it, making it more robust and deeply rooted. One of the most challenging aspects of forging faith in silence is the call to wait patiently. Waiting is often seen as a passive act, but in the context of faith, it is an active posture of trust and expectancy. To wait on God is to believe that His timing is perfect and that He is working even when we cannot perceive it. This kind of waiting is not idle. It involves continued prayer, obedience, and reliance on His word. Waiting in faith shapes us into people who are not only prepared to receive God's blessings, but also equipped to steward them wisely. The silence of God also provides an opportunity to shift our focus from seeking answers to seeking Him. When God appears silent, we are reminded that our faith is not merely in what He can do, but in who He is. This realization transforms our relationship with Him, deepening it from a transactional exchange to an intimate connection based on love, trust, and worship. In the silence, we learn to cherish God for His presence rather than for His provision. Examples from Scripture illustrate how silence plays a pivotal role in the development of faith. Consider Abraham, who waited decades for the fulfillment of God's promise to make him the father of many nations. During those silent years, his faith grew as he learned to trust in God's timing and sovereignty. Similarly, Job, amidst profound suffering and divine silence, declared, "Though He slay me, yet will I trust Him." These stories remind us that silence is not a sign of abandonment, but a crucible in which faith is purified and strengthened. In the end, the silence of God invites us to build a faith that endures. It is a faith that does not depend on immediate answers or favorable circumstances, but rests securely in the knowledge of His unchanging nature. Such faith becomes a foundation that withstands life's storms and a testimony that inspires others to trust Him as well. When we embrace the silence as a season of faith building, we discover that it is not a void, but a sacred space where God's greatest work in us often takes place. God's silence serves as a profound teacher, inviting us into a deeper understanding of humility and dependence on Him. When the answers we seek are delayed and His voice seems distant, the silence becomes an opportunity to reevaluate our posture before Him. In these quiet moments, we are reminded of the limitations of our own understanding and strength, compelling us to surrender fully to His wisdom, timing, and sovereignty. One of the most striking lessons that silence teaches is the reality of our dependence on God. In a world that often celebrates self-sufficiency, independence, and control, seasons of silence confront us with the truth that we are not in charge. We cannot force God's hand, demand His intervention, or manipulate His timing. The silence reveals that our plans and efforts, no matter how well-intentioned, are insufficient apart from His guidance and power. It is in this humbling realization that true dependence begins to take root. Humility is born when we acknowledge our need for God. Silence strips away the illusion that we have everything figured out and brings us face to face with our vulnerabilities and limitations. This humbling process is not meant to shame us, but to reposition our hearts. When we recognize that we are not the center of the universe and that our understanding is finite, we create space for God to work in ways that are far greater than anything we could achieve on our own. His silence is an invitation to relinquish control, allowing Him to take His rightful place as the author and sustainer of our lives. Dependence on God in silence also means shifting our trust from visible outcomes to His unseen hand. When God is silent, we are often tempted to rely on our own reasoning or to seek quick fixes. Yet the silence challenges us to resist these impulses and instead lean fully on His promises. Dependence is not passive, it requires active faith, a commitment to walk in obedience even when we do not understand His ways. This dependence teaches us to wait on Him, trusting that His timing is perfect and that He is orchestrating every detail for our good and His glory. The silence of God also exposes the pride that can hinder our relationship with Him. Pride whispers that we should have all the answers, that we deserve immediate results, and that we can navigate life on our terms. Silence confronts these lies, gently but firmly reminding us that we are not self-sufficient. It teaches us that dependence on God is not weakness but wisdom. When we humble ourselves before Him, admitting our need and seeking His guidance, we open the door for His power to work in and through us. This lesson of humility and dependence is evident in the life of Moses. Before leading the Israelites out of Egypt, Moses spent 40 years in the wilderness, a season marked by God's silence. During this time, Moses learned humility and dependence as he cared for sheep in obscurity, far removed from the grandeur of Pharaoh's palace. It was in this humbling silence that God prepared Moses for his ultimate purpose. When the time came, Moses was not only equipped with the skills of a shepherd, but also with a heart that relied completely on God's direction. The process of learning dependence in silence can be uncomfortable, but it is also deeply transformative. It refines our character, strengthens our trust, and deepens our relationship with God. Silence shifts our perspective, teaching us to value His presence over His provision and to seek His will above our own desires. This dependence becomes a source of strength, enabling us to face challenges with confidence, not in ourselves, but in the one who holds all things together. Ultimately, God's silence is a gift that draws us closer to Him. It dismantles our pride, deepens our reliance, and reminds us that apart from Him, we can do nothing. In the silence, we discover that true strength is found not in our independence, but in our complete surrender to His grace, wisdom, and power. This lesson, though often difficult, prepares us to walk in greater alignment with His purpose, equipped to handle both the blessings and the challenges that lie ahead. When God is silent, the temptation to stop moving forward can be overwhelming. It is easy to feel disheartened, questioning whether our efforts are worthwhile or if God is even listening. However, silence is not a signal to pause, but an invitation to trust and persevere. In the quiet, God calls us to continue walking in obedience, believing in His faithfulness even when we cannot see the full picture. This steadfast movement in faith shapes our character and aligns us with His divine plan. One of the most significant lessons of walking in obedience during silence is understanding that our actions are not dependent on our feelings or circumstances, but on our commitment to God. It is natural to feel disillusioned when prayers seem unanswered or when life doesn't unfold as expected. Yet obedience is not about seeking immediate results, but about remaining faithful to what we know to be true. This kind of obedience is an act of worship, a declaration that we trust God's wisdom over our own understanding. In the silence, the importance of small, consistent acts of faith becomes clear. Often we expect obedience to result in immediate and dramatic change. But just as a farmer tends to his crops day after day without seeing instant results, so must we continue to nurture our faith through prayer, worship, and living according to God's word. These small acts, seemingly insignificant in the moment, build the foundation for the breakthroughs that lie ahead. They keep us connected to God's heart and prepare us to receive what He has planned. Continuing in obedience during silence also develops spiritual endurance. Silence can feel like a wilderness season, barren and devoid of clear direction. But it is in this wilderness that our capacity to trust God is stretched and strengthened. By choosing to obey when we cannot hear His voice, we affirm our faith in His character rather than in the circumstances around us. This perseverance transforms us, making us more resilient and mature, capable of withstanding life's uncertainties without wavering in our trust. One of the most profound examples of walking in obedience during silence is found in the story of Noah. God gave Noah a clear command to build an ark, even though there was no immediate sign of the flood He promised. For years, Noah worked in obedience, facing ridicule and doubt, yet he remained faithful. It was not until the appointed time that God's promise was fulfilled, vindicating Noah's trust and persistence. His story reminds us that obedience in silence is not wasted effort, it is preparation for God's greater purpose. Another powerful aspect of obedience in silence is its ability to refine our motives. In times of silence, we are forced to confront why we follow God. Is it for His blessings, or is it out of love and devotion? Obedience in the absence of visible rewards purifies our intentions, shifting our focus from seeking His hand to seeking His heart. This transformation deepens our relationship with Him, making it more intimate and authentic. Silence also calls us to trust in God's timing. Obedience during these periods requires patience, as we may not see immediate results or understand how our actions fit into His plan. Yet, His timing is always perfect. Just as a painter's masterpiece requires layers of work before it is complete, so does God's plan for our lives. Our obedience during silence is one of those crucial layers, contributing to the beauty and purpose He is crafting. Lastly, walking in obedience during silence serves as a testimony to those around us. When others see us remain steadfast in faith, even in the absence of clear answers, they are encouraged and inspired. Our perseverance becomes a witness to the reliability of God's promises and the power of trusting Him, even in uncertainty. In the end, obedience in silence is not about achieving immediate outcomes, but about aligning our hearts with God's will. It is about choosing to walk forward step by step, trusting that He is guiding us even when the way is unclear. This faith-filled movement positions us to receive His blessings and prepares us to fulfill the purposes He has set before us. Silence may feel like a pause, but it is, in fact, an invitation to deeper trust, greater faith, and unwavering obedience. God's silence, though challenging, often signals that a breakthrough is on the horizon. It is easy to view silence as an end and abandonment of hope, or avoid where God's presence should be. However, the truth is that silence is a preparatory season, a time of divine alignment that precedes transformation and victory. It is during these quiet moments that God is setting the stage for a breakthrough that will not only answer our prayers, but also surpass our expectations in ways we could never imagine. Breakthroughs rarely occur without a process. In the same way that dawn follows the darkest hour, moments of divine intervention and clarity often come after periods of silence and waiting. This silence is not God withholding His blessings, but Him ensuring that we are ready to receive them. During these times, God is working in ways we cannot see, orchestrating circumstances, refining our character, and aligning the details of His plan. His silence is not an activity, it is intentional preparation. A powerful example of this truth is found in the story of Jesus' crucifixion and resurrection. On the cross, Jesus experienced a moment of profound silence when He cried out, my God, why have you forsaken me?" To those present, it seemed like the end, but in that silence, the greatest breakthrough in history was being prepared. 3 days later, the resurrection shattered the silence, bringing life, hope, and salvation to the world. This pattern of silence followed by breakthrough is a recurring theme in God's dealings with humanity. In our own lives, the silence that precedes a breakthrough is often uncomfortable and confusing. It challenges our faith, tests our patience, and forces us to confront our doubts. Yet, it is in these moments that God is doing His most significant work. He is teaching us to trust Him not for the immediate gratification of answers, but for His greater plan and purpose. This trust becomes the foundation upon which the breakthrough is built. Breakthroughs following silence often bring not just what we want, but what we truly need. God's plans are higher than ours, and His timing is perfect. In the silence, He is not merely addressing our current desires, but preparing us for a future that aligns with His will. This alignment ensures that when the breakthrough comes, it is sustainable and transformative, not fleeting or superficial. The silence also allows us to develop a deeper appreciation for the breakthrough when it arrives. Waiting in faith makes the fulfillment of God's promises all the more meaningful. It reminds us that every good and perfect gift comes from Him, fostering gratitude and humility in our hearts. This gratitude shifts our focus from the gift to the giver, strengthening our relationship with Him and deepening our worship. Moreover, breakthroughs following silence are often accompanied by a testimony that impacts others. Our journey through silence and into victory becomes a story of God's faithfulness, one that encourages and inspires those around us. The struggles we endure in the quiet moments equip us to empathize with and support others who face similar challenges. Our breakthroughs, therefore, extend beyond personal blessing to become a source of hope and faith for our community. Another key aspect of the silence before a breakthrough is that it teaches us perseverance. Breakthroughs often require us to keep pressing forward even when we cannot see progress. This perseverance builds spiritual endurance, preparing us not only for the breakthrough itself, but also for the responsibilities and opportunities it will bring. Like an athlete training for a competition, the effort invested during the silent season strengthens us for what lies ahead. Ultimately, the silence before a breakthrough is not a void, but a sacred space where God is actively working. It is a time of hidden growth, preparation, and alignment, leading to a moment when His plans are revealed in all their fullness. When the breakthrough comes, it will be evident that His silence was not neglect, but an expression of His wisdom, love, and faithfulness. Embracing the silence with trust and anticipation allows us to experience the full depth and beauty of the breakthroughs He has prepared for us. In conclusion, God's silence is not an absence, but a profound presence, a sacred space where growth, transformation, and divine alignment occur. It is in the quiet that we learn to trust Him beyond the noise, to deepen our faith, and to refine our character. His silence teaches us humility and dependence, calling us to walk in obedience even when we cannot see the way forward. It shapes our perseverance and positions us for breakthroughs that surpass our understanding. Every moment of divine silence is purposeful, designed not to punish or abandon, but to prepare and elevate. It challenges us to rely not on what we feel or see, but on who God is, faithful, sovereign, and unchanging. The breakthroughs that follow His silence testify to His perfect timing and boundless love, reminding us that He is always at work for our good and His glory. So when faced with God's silence, embrace it as a season of hidden growth. Trust the process, hold fast to His promises, and move forward in obedience. You know that the silence is not the end of the story, but the prelude to something greater. Through it, He is crafting a masterpiece in your life, one that will reflect His glory and fulfill His purpose in ways beyond what you could ask or imagine. Let us find peace in the silence, hope in His unseen hand, and strength in the certainty of His unfailing love.